Okay, so now we're working on problem number 2, best versus good. We're still talking about linear regression. Suppose a data set is composed of the points 1, 3, -3, -7, and 5, 7 on a coordinate plane. So let's go ahead and let's graph these real quick, or let's plot them. 1, 3, so here's 0, 0. There's 1, and we'll go up 3. There's our 1, 3. So I'll go 1, comma 3 right there. Let's see, -3, -7. So -3 is right there. -7 would be about right there. And we'll go off to the side. We'll say -3, comma -7. That's that point. And then, let's see, 5, 7 right there. So then we'll go over 5, and then we go up 7. Right there. Okay. So it says, are these points collinear? How can you tell? Well, if I take something with a straight edge, these 2 points are collinear, but the third one is not. So when it asks, are these points collinear, it's got an S, so that means more than one. So they're talking about all 3. So all 3 are not collinear. These 2 line up, this one doesn't. Similarly, we could try it here. Those 2 line up, this one doesn't. And try it right there. These 2 line up, this one does not. So we could say no, comma, these points are not collinear. Right here, these points are not oh, I need another L there. So these points, no, these points are not collinear. So notice how I'm using this part here and flipping it into an answer. Then it asks, how can you tell? So we got that part, and then we want to answer that second part there. How can you tell? These points, they don't lie on a single straight line. These points do not lie on a single straight line, period. That's how we can tell. Alright, that looks good. Determine the equation of a line passing through the points 1, 3 and 5, 7. Graph this line on the coordinate plane. Okay. So what we got to do is we've got to calculate the slope first for these 2 points. So let's take these 2 points and let's go ahead and label them x sub 1, y sub 1. This is going to be point 1. So this is the first point. So the x for this one will be sub 1 because it's the first point, and the y here will be sub 1 because this is the first point. Since this is the second point, underneath it I go x sub 2, y sub 2. So this y value here is for the second point. This y value is for the first point. That's all that is. So now the slope formula, m equals, and one way I remember it is rise over run. Your slope is rise over run, so our y's are going to go on top. Y sub 2 minus y sub 1 all over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. And then we just calculate this out. So our slope, m, we want to get our y's. Y sub 2 is 7. 7 minus y sub 1 is 3. And then we could go, let's see here, x sub 2, that's 5, minus x sub 1 is 1, 7 minus 3 is 4, and 5 minus 1 is 4, so that's going to equal 4 over 4, which is going to equal 1. So our slope is 1. Now we need to solve. Here, I'll just go ahead and circle that like this, because we now know our slope is 1. Now we need to solve for the b. So in a linear equation, because we're solving for a line passing through the 2 points, the equation of a line is y equals m, the slope, times x plus b. What we can do is we can pick either point and sub in the x and the y over here. Here's a y, here's an x. We can also sub in our slope, and then all that will be left that we don't know is b. So we just solve all this part, all the variables we do know, and we're left with b. Let's go ahead and pick this point, because this x is 1 and our slope is 1, so that'll give us some easy numbers to work with. So if we take our y is 3, our x is going to be 1, so I'll put a 1 underneath the x. Our slope is 1, so we put a different 1 right there, plus b. So we end up with 3 equals 1 plus b. And to get rid of that 1, we subtract it from both sides. So I subtract 1, these two cancel. I'm going both sides of the equal sign. And what we get is 3 minus 1, that's going to be 2. 2 equals b. Now that we've got that part, we can go back and sub everything into our equation. So this was the first step. This was the second step. Now we're at the third step. Y equals mx plus b. We know our m's going to be 1. Our x is an input, so we don't actually need to put anything there. We need our b though. Our b is 2 plus 2. And our y is our output, so we don't want to put anything there. And we can simplify this. 1 times x, well, that's going to equal x, and then plus b. So y equals x plus b. Oh, we know b is 2. So y equals x plus 2. And that's our equation that goes through these 2 points. And they say also to graph this line on the coordinate plane. So we take our 1, 3. Our 1, 3 is right here. And our 5, 7. Our 5, 7 is actually over here. 5, 7. So let's go ahead and put a line through those two. We'll put some arrows there. And y equals x plus 2. We'll just go ahead and label that. That looks nice. Okay, let's do the next problem. Let's knock these out. Determine and graph the equation of a line passing through the points at -3, -7, and 5, 7. So real quick let's label our first point x sub 1, y sub 1, x sub 2, y sub 2. So our slope, m, equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1 all over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Our y sub 2 is 7. Our y sub 1 is 7. It's a -7. Had me pause there for a second, because 7 minus 7 would be 0, and we would end up with a 0 for our slope. And a 0 slope you would have a flat line. So let's see here. We gotta do our x's now. X sub 2 is 5. And then minus negative 3. Now, when you subtract the negative, you change the sign, and this one becomes the opposite, so you're actually adding. Similarly, down here, you change it to the opposite. And that's how you deal with the subtracting a negative. So we end up with 14 over 8. And we can simplify that. Or we could leave it. If we were to simplify it, 8 would go in there one time, and you'd end up with a 6 left over. And then 6 over 8, that should reduce to 3/4. So we could say 1 3/4. Okay, that takes care of the first step. Second step, y equals m times x plus b. All we've got to do is pick a point and plug it in. We know our slope now. Our slope, we can actually write it in decimal form in this step if we wanted to, if it helps out. So for our m right here, we could write 1.75, because that's the same thing as 3/4. Think of quarters and dollars. 75 cents is 3/4 out of a dollar. And we could put, for our x, we could do negative 3, or we could do 5. It just depends on which point we want to use. I'm going to go ahead with the 5 plus b. And then we got to go with that 7 there. I'm going to go ahead and use a calculator on this one. 8.75. So we subtract that from both sides. Those two cancel. And we should end up with 7 minus 8.75. Yep. So negative 1.75 equals b. That's our b right there. Okay, so last step, put it all together. Y equals mx plus b. We know our m is 1.75x, and then our b is a negative 1.75. We could put a plus a negative, but this here is a simpler way to put it. And we might as well go ahead and graph that one while we're at it. So that's for points negative 3, negative 7, and 5, 7. So we'll go ahead and label that there. Negative 3, negative 7, and 5, 7. It's about right there. And then we could say, maybe we'll go up here, because we still got a line we got to do right there, and I probably want to have some space. Y equals 1.75x minus 1.75. Okay, so this here is that one right there. That's all that is. Now they want us to do the last one. Let's move it up. So first we got to get the slope. So we go m equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1 all over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. And let's label these real quick. X sub 1, y sub 1, and then x sub 2, y sub 2. So now we know which ones are going where. Okay, let me move that up just a little more. Y sub 2 is 3. Y sub 1 is negative 7. And then x sub 2 is 1. X sub 1 is negative 3. Let's go ahead and change it to the opposite for both of these, since we're subtracting negatives. So the top becomes a 10, the bottom becomes a 4. And if we simplify that, 4 can go into 10 2 times. And 2 times 4 is 8, so 10 minus 8 is 2. You'll end up with 2/4 left over. 2/4 is a half, so we end up with 2 1/2, which we could write as a 0.5. Because a half written in decimal is 0.5. Now let's go ahead and let's plug in one of the points and our slope to go ahead and solve for the equation. So we notice we got a 1 right here. Usually 1s are easy to work with. When I look at points, I look for a 1 usually. 1s and 0s, because they just make it easy. Since I got a 1 there, I'm going to choose that point. Oh, let's see if I can pause real quick. My computer's telling me I need another power source. Okay, I'm going to have to stop this real quick and I'll pick it right back up.